the illusion of power, and the nature of control. The truth is, I am as perfect as anyone else. My imperfections, my mistakes, my remorse for being human, these are not unique burdens, nor do they diminish me. They are shared by every person who has ever lived, even the leaders we elevate and the institutions we worship. We vest power in these symbols, governments, ideologies, believing that they operate beyond the flaws of the human beings who create and sustain them. But this is a delusion, one that is easily dismantled by observing how these systems function when real power is at stake. Consider the election between Trump and Biden. I agree that it was fixed, not in the way conspiracy theorists or political commentators like to frame it, but in a much broader and more insidious sense. The reality is this: if anyone had the power to guarantee the outcome of a casino game, would they ever give that power up? The same logic applies to governments. The mechanisms of control, once acquired, are never willingly surrendered. That power exists, and the outcome we received wasn't the product of demic purity or public will. It was the result of a balancing force, the pendulum swinging as it always does, guided by those who understand how to control its movement. The masses believe that their prayers have been answered when their chosen leader wins. But that belief is another illusion. There is a gas pedal, a brake, and someone else steering the car. Power is not found in the election results of the promises made by candidates. It lies in the ability to control the process itself. Superheroes, those fantastical beings with supernatural abilities, are dismissed as figments of imagination, but they represent something very real. The greatest superpower isn't flight or strength, it's invisibility. The ability to act without being seen, to influence without being detected. True power lies in controlling events from the shadows, making moves that no one can trace. If you cannot be seen, you cannot be targeted. In the military, we understood this. As a soldier, my strength was only as good as my ability to maintain initiative. Once the initiative was lost, I was vulnerable. No amount of training, equipment, or firepower could save me if the enemy struck first and maintained control of the battle's tempo. Conventional military strategy hinges on visibility, massive formations, armored units, overwhelming firepower. The goal is to be so imposing, so visible, that the enemy cannot overcome the sheer scale of the force they face. But visibility is a double-edged sword. The moment your movements are predictable, you can be targeted. And once you're targeted, you can be defeated. Special operations forces, by contrast, operate on the principle of invisibility. They strike from the shadows, relying on speed, precision, and surprise. They do not seek to hold ground or win wars on their own. Their purpose is to weaken, destabilize, and create opportunities for conventional forces to exploit. Special operations forces do not take countries. They pave the way for larger forces to do so. That is exactly what happened in Afghanistan in 2001. When the United States invaded Afghanistan after the September 11th attacks, the strategy was clear. Special operations forces, particularly Green Berets, were inserted into the country to work with indigenous forces opposed to the Taliban. The Northern Alliance became a critical asset, providing manpower and local knowledge that the Americans could leverage. The Green Berets did the war on their own. They couldn't have. Their role was to guide, coordinate, and enable the larger effort. Once the Taliban was weakened and disorganized, conventional forces moved in, overwhelming what remained of the opposition. This strategy worked, but it also revealed the limits of special operations. They are not designed to fight prolonged wars or occupy territory. When conflicts escalate beyond a certain point, when the enemy regroups and adapts, conventional forces must take over. That is where the U.S. strategy faltered in Afghanistan. The initial success of special operations gave way to prolonged occupation that required the very visibility and permanence that special forces avoid. The initiative was lost, and with it the effectiveness of the mission. The same principle applies to power beyond the battlefield. True power is invisible. It does not announce itself with grand speeches or public displays. It operates quietly, behind the scenes, manipulating events without ever being detected. The masses are distracted by the visible, the leaders, the elections, the wars, while the real power brokers remain hidden, steering the course of history without ever being seen. This is why the belief in moral clarity and righteous causes, in the idea that leaders are savior, is so dangerous. It blinds people to the reality of power and leaves them vulnerable to manipulation. Just as I was vulnerable when I lost the initiative in combat, society becomes vulnerable when it loses sight of who really controls the events around them. The pendulum swings back and forth, giving the appearance of change, but the direction is always guided by those who understand how to control the mechanism. The masses cheer or despair, depending on which way the pendulum swings, but they fail to see that the movement itself is orchestrated. I killed many men in Afghanistan. I do not regret it, nor do I feel shame for being a killer. But I do feel the remorse of being human, of knowing that I am as flawed as anyone else. My perfection lies in my acceptance of this fact that I am no better or worse than the leaders who wield power or the soldiers who fight under their command. We are all human, and we are all subject to the same illusions. But understanding the illusion is the first step towards seeing the truth. Power is not found in the visible structures of government or in the leaders we elevate. It is found in the shadows, in the ability to act without being seen, to influence without being known. The world is not driven by moral absolutes or democratic ideals. It is driven by those who understand how to control the unseen forces that shape events. And until we recognize this, we will remain prisoners of the illusions we create, blindly following the pendulum as it swings from one illusion to the next.